Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another conversation in our series, our webinar series on Sikh Studies. And if you haven't seen the earlier recordings or earlier discussions in the webinar series, first of all, shame on you. You should have watched them. You can, though. You can go to the Sikh Foundation website, and all of these have been recorded, and you can go back and listen to them. That I should just say a word about how they got set up. I was asked by Narinder Kapani, the founder of the Sikh Foundation, who had, along with me in 1976, sponsored the first conference on Sikh Studies in the United States many years ago. And so Narinder said, you know, the time has come again to do what we did back in 1976, and that is to try to take the temperature of Sikh Studies, to see what's going on, to try to bring together as many people as we can in the field. And he said, fortunately, we can do that now on Zoom, and we can just go everywhere. And so we can have a conversation with everyone. And that's what we're doing. And what we're seeing is that the field is remarkably diverse, wonderfully interesting. And we've had a chance to have a conversation with some of the most lively and interesting people who are leading this expanding and very interesting field of Sikh Studies. And today we have with us Shinder Thandi. And I have to confess that I've known Shinder for years. He's an old friend. Shinder, I'm trying to remember when we first met. Was that a conference someplace? I know we were in New Zealand on one occasion, but we keep on running. Huh?
Yeah, probably at a conference first.
Probably at a conference. And then we were lucky enough to have Shinder come to UC Santa Barbara and teach an occasional course. And then he came on a more regular basis. And so the last several years, he's been teaching regularly at the UC Santa Barbara. So Shinder, old friend, it's good to see you. And, you know, I have to admit, as much as I know you, I don't know everything. So this conversation is going to be as revealing to me as it is to everybody else. So first of all, we always like to start with breaking news. I know you're involved with the Journal of Punjab and Sikh Studies, or is it Sikh and Punjab Studies? Punjab and Sikh Studies.
Yes.
So you've got a new issue coming out. Tell us about that.
Okay, so the Journal of Sikh and Punjab Studies, it has sort of, it's been going for about 28 years now. So it's because we're just working on the 28th volume.
But in different names. Originally, it was
yes, there are three reincarnations actually. Started as the International Journal of Punjab Studies.
Right.
You know, happy to talk about the history of that. Then it sort of became the Journal of Punjab Studies, and for the last few years, it became the Journal of Sikh and Punjab Studies.
And the addition of the name Sikh and Punjab Studies was to indicate that Sikh Studies obviously is not just in the Punjab, so it's a global phenomenon. Is that the point?
Well, no. When we first started the journal, we wanted to focus on what we call the Three Punjabs. So the International Journal of Punjab Studies was supposed to focus on the historical Punjab, which would be the colonial, pre-colonial Punjab. It would focus on contemporary Punjabs, which of course, you know, also including West Punjab in Pakistan, and also Punjabi diaspora. So the Three Punjabs. So that was the focus of the journal. That was the sort of main objective, is to promote Punjab studies. But after about volume 20, I think it was 20 or 21, we actually did an audit of the content. We did a content analysis of what was being published in the journal. And we actually found that 65 to 70% of the content was basically on East Punjab and basically on the Sikhs. Right. So we thought it made sense. It made sense to actually change the title to convey the content, reflect the content of the journal. So
the title simply now reflects what the journal has been always pretty much doing. It's been on Punjab studies, to be sure, but the overwhelming majority related to Sikhism in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me actually of the conversation that we had way back. We set the journal up in 1994. And there was a very tense conversation between, I think there were 6 people at that time on the editorial board. And what should be the name of this journal? You know, we're talking about 1994. Should it be Sikh Studies, Journal of Sikh Studies, what you know, 1 or 2 people wanted, or should it be the Journal of Punjab Studies? And there was a very tense conversation. And in the end, I think the consensus was, you know, given that Punjab had undergone a period of turmoil, you know, sort of 1980s, early 90s, and to start a Journal of Sikh Studies may perhaps, you know, not have been a good idea at that time, at that particular time. You know, because the various sort of reactions that we may get from other scholars, from the sort of various other people. So we chose to title a Journal of Punjab Studies. But of course, you know, Punjab's, you know, the whole field has changed since then. You know, and it was quite appropriate now to change the title.
So I want to come back to this because I found it really interesting and how it fits in with other journals. But we were about to talk about this new issue that's coming out on something that's very timely. Can you talk about that? Yeah.
So our next issue, the spring issue, will be the normal issues that's coming out in April, which you know, will be a collection of articles relating to Punjab, Sikhs, etc. But I've been working for the last couple of months on putting together an issue, a special issue on the sort of farmer agitation, Kisan Andolan, that's been going on for almost 4 or 5 months now. So I have about 14 people on board who are committed to write a paper. And we're going to explore different aspects, different dimensions of this protest movement. Situation with the passing of the 3 ordinances by the Modi administration. But we also want to look at the historical situation. We will look at some past peasant struggles in Punjab. We will look at diaspora sport for the farmers. We will look at sort of the how Punjab agriculture actually does need reform and what may be the ways forward. You know, and we will also outline, you know, the really limitations and the serious drawbacks of the current legislation that is being proposed.
Well, it couldn't be more timely. I mean, the Kisan Andolan has been described as the largest protest movement in the world. And at times it's totally immobilized Delhi, the capital. And a lot of the support comes from the Punjab. You see pictures of farmers coming in with their turbans and driving tractors and circling the city. And for good reason. I don't understand the entire complexities, but as I understand of it, the main point of the Modi regulations is to open up the opportunity for agribusiness to essentially swoop in and marginalize the small farmers of the Punjab. I may have that wrong. You would know much better than I.
No. You're absolutely right. I mean, these 3 ordinances are basically trying to sort of do away with the current institutional structures, right, and to bring in agribusinesses, corporates, into the procurement distribution of the food grains. They're also designed to basically introduce a free market. So this is in line with the, you know, the government's neoliberalism policies that have been going on. You know, the Indian corporate sector is dying to get into the food grains market, whether it's in terms of procurement, whether it's in terms of distribution. And this is a great opportunity for them. You know, the Modi administration is very corporate biased, and it's also very urban biased. So in a way, you know, the new laws will make sure that the urban middle classes especially will always get access to cheap food. But of course, it'll be at the expense of the farmers. You know,
Right.
I would say that the middle, the small, middle, marginal farmers are going to be totally devastated, especially if the which is feared if the minimum support price goes, because
Mhm.
that's their only guaranteed income. You know, and if that's the threat, if that disappears, then we could see, you know, hundreds of thousands of impoverished farmers. You know, yes, the wealthy will always benefit, because the wealthy benefit from the green revolution. You know, the free markets always benefit the wealthy. So inequalities will increase, as they have been increasing in India in general, but it'll be at the expense of impoverishing the peasantry. Um, you know, another point here is that really the peasantry, you know, have nowhere to go. You know, India is not a country that has been producing millions and millions of jobs. You know, there isn't a massive transfer of surplus labor from agriculture to industry,
Right.
because what India has been experiencing is basically jobless growth, and
Mhm.
so really in the short term, uh, these laws are a real threat to the Punjab peasantry, and to uh, other peasantry in other states too.
Well, this is a very important issue and a very timely one, and I'm really glad that you're doing it. I'm sure a lot of people have questions and comments. And by the way, if anybody's watching this, obviously you can't do it if you're watching a recording, but if you're watching this live and you have a question, there's a Q&A section down in the lower part of your screen. You can ask a question, and then in the latter part of our conversation, we'll try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. But Shinder, I want to move on to some other things.
So,
And that is, you've been involved with the journal from the very beginning, right? And now we talked with Gurharpal Singh not very long ago about, and of course he's been associated with the Journal of Sikh Foundations. How are you guys? Are you competitors? Are you doing different kinds of things? Do you like check an article and say, it's not good enough for our journal, maybe Sikh Foundations will take it? I mean, how do you, how
yeah.
does this work?
Well, we're not competitors. We have different objectives. We are sort of, in a way, maybe, sorry, the Sikh formations journal came up a lot later, and ironically, it's the people I was working with. So Gurharpal was also part of the International Journal of Punjab Studies. Arvind Mandair was also involved in the Punjab Research Group. You know, sort of that we had, from which, you know, came out this journal. So in a way, maybe, you know, the time was right now compared with 1994 to set up a journal which looks at Sikhs, or largely at the Sikh community, Sikh
Yeah, you've
formation.
been involved with the Punjab Research Group as well. I don't think we've mentioned that yet in our conversations. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah. The Punjab Research Group actually was established way back in 1984, early 19. I think it was March or April 1984. You may remember that's the time when militancy in Punjab is sort of accelerating. You may remember that communal tensions were pretty high at that time. So there was a conference that took place in Coventry, which is around communal harmony in Punjab.
That's
And,
your old
and
university, right? Covenant?
yes, Coventry University, yeah, my old university. Now, a group of us, most of us were sort of graduate students, sort of got together, and said, look, we need to set something up to actually look at what's happening in Punjab, you know, understand it better, understand the origins of what's going on. So we set up this Punjab Research Group, and it met. And originally, sort of, it was meeting in people's houses. So, you know, I would have a meeting in my house, or you know, others will have a meeting in their houses. But over time, as the size of the gatherings grew, we went to universities. So it was always held at the universities after a couple of years. Coventry University, but it also went to other universities. And now, at the moment, it's being convened by at Oxford University. So it's a long history, and it attracts regularly. You know, we used to have 3 meetings a year, but now we have 2. But it attracts about 30 to 35 people each time.
Mostly people in the UK?
No, yes, mostly people from the UK, but we've had Sikh Studies scholars come there from North America as well as from India to give presentations there too.
Yeah, so at one point you tried to start Sikh Studies at Coventry, and that didn't totally pan out, right?
Yeah, around the sort of late 1990s, I would say. You know, we sort of had this. We were working together. I was working here with the institute. We had a Sikh Cultural Society, so we were doing all sorts of work, publishing a magazine, etc. But we were also interested, with the help of the community, to set up a Sikh Studies program at Coventry University. So we really wanted to set up the first sort of BA in Sikh Studies. You know, Arvind Mandar was we were working together at that time, and you know, we sort of had the sort of you know, some obstacles. So the university sort of said, okay, we will accredit you at the diploma level. So that would be 2 years. But of course, you know, if the program is successful, then we will also credit you with the, we will, you know, make it into a BA. You know, unfortunately, you know, it ran for 1 year. So out of these sort of, it's a 3-year, it would have been a 3-year program. So certificate in the first year, diploma in the second year, and a BA degree in the third year. So unfortunately, only ran for 1 year. And for various reasons, you know, don't want to go into here, but one of the major reasons was the lack of institutional support. You know, it requires funding, it requires, you know, hiring of faculty, it requires resources, and I'm not sure, you know, the time was right for the university to give a commitment to that.
Yeah, well,
this is why I think the Wolverhampton program, you know, is a sort of like a you know, 360, you know, turnaround, because there the university seems to be committed to providing funding for it.
Yeah, Birmingham also. Yeah, so it's yeah, and I could, as somebody who's been trying to develop Sikh Studies along with Narendra Kapani for 30 or 40 years, I can tell you, yeah, it takes money. It takes money, and it takes influence, and it takes some administrators who think, yeah, this is something whose time has come.
Yeah.
So at one point, then you came to California. How did that happen?
Well, I came to California partly because, you know, my children started coming here. But partly because, you know, I had heard about the Sikh Studies program at UC Santa Barbara, and I wanted to be part of it. So initially I used to come, you know, like for a quarter. So I would deliver a course on my sort of other specialist area, which is sort of development economics. So I would come and deliver a course on global development or development economics. I did that for 4 or 5 years, and then I had a sabbatical year, and I spent all of that at UC Santa Barbara. And then when I retired from Coventry University in 2015, I basically sort of moved to UC Santa Barbara and started teaching a course on Sikhism, course on sort of Sikh diaspora, which were my actually research areas, which I never previously had the opportunity to actually teach on. So that was a fantastic kind of a opportunity.
Yeah, because previously you were in economics, right?
Yeah, I always taught economics. All my sort of training was in economics, but I was interested more and more in sort of development economics, international, global economics, if you like. But my research actually was in the area of Punjab and Punjab studies, Sikh studies.
So when you came to UC Santa Barbara, Gurinder Singh Mann was the Kundankar Kapani Chair of Sikh Studies.
Yes.
So how
Yeah.
did you sort of divide up the responsibilities between the two of you?
Well, my involvement actually was basically at two levels. So when I would be coming to Santa Barbara, I may deliver some lectures in his course, this very large course he had on Introduction to Sikhism, something 300 plus students.
Wow.
So I would deliver a couple of lectures there. In my actually final one of my the sabbatical year, I actually also introduced actually taught Punjabi, introductory Punjabi for 1 year. So that would be sort of three-quarter courses over the year. That was very interesting and challenging for me because I had to really upgrade my Punjabi skills. But it was a great opportunity. The main involvement I had, apart from coming to Santa Barbara and at that time delivering these lectures, was actually participation in the summer school. So Punjab Studies Summer School, which Professor Mann had introduced, was a phenomenal program. It was 6 weeks in
the Punjab, right?
In the heat of Punjab. We were actually housed in a very nice hotel in Chandigarh.
Shivalik View Hotel.
Shivalik View Hotel, yeah. So all these scholars were coming to us, delivering these fantastic lectures, and I'd learned so much there. Professor Garewal, Professor Indu Banga, and some of the other scholars working on Punjab Sikhs would come, deliver these lectures, and there would be sort of travel time as well to visit all these fantastic historic places around Punjab. There was a week where we would go from Chandigarh to travel to sort of Amritsar on the other side, stay there, look, and some of the students actually would spend a night at the Harmandir Sahib to just see what was the opening and closing ceremonies. And we went all the way up to the Dharamsala, the place of the Dalai Lama. So it was a fantastic opportunity, and that was a unique program, which was run for about, I think, 12, 13 years by Professor Mann. And in addition to everything else that was going on at Santa Barbara. So I would say, Professor Mann's contribution to Sikh Studies is fantastic, and I don't think it could be matched. Not in the foreseeable future anyway. And the Sikh Studies program at UC Santa Barbara, I would say, was the gold standard. It set the gold standard. A large class in Sikhs on Introduction to Sikhism, a graduate program, a summer school. The journal had moved there at that time. There was a fantastic sort of visiting scholars program, visiting doctoral students program. And of course, this was all done through the Center for Sikh and Punjab Studies that was established there. So fantastic sort of a program, which it's a challenge to current sort of Sikh Studies scholars to match or exceed that program. I think that would be that's goes to the credit of Professor Mann and to UC Santa Barbara, and of course to you, Mark, because you were always 100% behind this program.
Yes, but I didn't teach the courses. So after Professor Mann retired and went back to New York, then I became the interim Kundankar Kapani Chair for Sikh Studies. But you continued then to teach the courses in Sikhism at Santa Barbara before Professor Anshu Malhotra, who was the first guest in our webinar series, joined us as the current Kundankar Kapani Chair in Sikh Studies. A chair named for Narinder Kapani's mother, who was a wonderful woman who deserved that recognition. And now, are you still teaching Sikh Studies?
Well, I taught that for 3 years. So I taught the Introduction to Sikhism course for 3 years. It sort of uh, it followed basically the format that had been established by Professor Mann. You know, it looked at sort of the chronological development of the Sikh community, the Sikh tradition, and of course, given my own particular interest, which is in the Sikh diaspora, so I would have a large segment of that at the end would be also focused on the Sikh diaspora. So yes, I taught that for 3 years, but since then, you know, after that, I was teaching more sort of more the standard courses in global studies, like globalization and development, global economics. So I stopped doing that a few years back, 2 years back.
But now the Journal of Sikh and Punjab Studies, which was based at UC Santa Barbara, is now administered through the Global Institute of Sikh Studies, right?
Yeah, yeah. So after Professor Mann retired, I think around 2015, there was a sort of there was some discussion among a number of scholars that you know, there had to be some continuation of the work that Professor Mann was engaged in, and also there was a need for some kind of sort of research center or resource center on the East Coast. So this nonprofit organization, the Global Institute of Sikh Studies, was set up, and it's I unfortunately haven't had the time to visit that given the situation, but it's the resource center. It houses the journal. It has fantastic resources, you know, very rare books, manuscripts, large number of copies of manuscripts that Professor Mann had gathered over his long period of travel to Punjab. It's a wonderful resource for people especially for graduate students, I would say, to use, and perhaps the largest collection on Sikhs on the East Coast anyway. I'm based in New Jersey.
Right. And then Professor Mann continues to be active in his research. I think he has a new book coming out on Guru Nanak, right? On rethinking scholarship on Guru Nanak.
Yeah, I mean, he has been working on Guru Nanak for a long time, and there's you know, one of the most authoritative pieces on Guru Nanak is his piece in the sort of Brill Encyclopedia of Sikhism, where he traces the whole sort of background, the context, the kind of the sort of the community that Guru Nanak was trying to create in Kartarpur. So, you know, it's one of the most authoritative, most original reworking of Baba Nanak, as he always calls Guru Nanak, reworking of his time, his period, and his contribution found in the Sikh tradition.
So, Shinder, let's talk about your own work. You know, you're an economist by training. How did you get involved in the field of Sikh studies? Right.
So basically, I think it goes back to my graduate, when I was doing my master's. So one of the things in this master's dissertation that I did, I had a chapter on contribution of Punjabi migrants to the Green Revolution. So what I was observing back in the UK were all these people who were sending back money to their families, remittances, sending back money. But this money wasn't necessarily always just for their consumption needs, you know, better clothing, better housing, etc., etc. But this money was also being sent back to buy tractors, okay, buy seed drills, buy other technologies, you know, maybe purchase a little bit more land. So in Coventry, we had this factory. I don't know whether you've heard of Massey Ferguson, was a big tractor manufacturer, and I
come from a farming community, so I identify.
Right. So I had heard of so many families who were actually donating tractors back to their families in Punjab, so that they could make the best of the new technologies, new fertilizers, new seeds that were coming available. And so I had this chapter on a contribution of migrants to the Green Revolution. And that basically just extended my sort of interest in Punjab and the Punjab economy, migration. Obviously, I was always interested in Punjab migration. And that's my entry. That's through sort of call it Punjab Studies. Mm-hmm. So in the sort of subsequent years, I've always focused on migration, the various links. You know, the diaspora homeland links.
Right.
That's my particular special interest. Right. Looking at whether these links are economic, political, sociological, whatever. You know, trying to look at how Punjab remains connected with this Punjabi Sikh diaspora. That's my area.
Do you have anything new coming out? Are you working on a project now?
Well, I just recently published a paper on looking at sort of how, with the COVID situation, how representations of the Indian diaspora, including the Punjab Sikh diaspora, how that was going on in the public discourses. You know, COVID, you know, there was this argument that it's true, you know, COVID was disproportionately affecting ethnic minorities. You know, there was this massive increase in data, which was showing COVID was affecting these ethnic minorities. And I wanted to see how that was being represented, the impacts of COVID were being represented on the Sikh Punjabi communities. And so I did a comparative study looking at the UK and the USA. But one paper that I did recently publish in the Sikh Formations in 2018 was on educated millennial Sikhs. I mentioned that paper because, you know, there's a huge controversy going on at the moment in England over a report that was published about a week ago on ethnic disparities. You know, what are the sort of looking at the causes of ethnic disparities in income, in health, you know, even, you know, contact, getting affected by COVID, etc. And what I'd argued, sorry, this report basically said, yes, there are massive disparities, but these disparities really have nothing to do with racial discrimination. You know, these are to do with class, socioeconomic differences.
I don't believe that.
You know, but what I'd argued, actually, in a way, I was a step ahead of that, because what I'd argued was, yes, of course, there are massive racial disparities in life outcomes, but actually there are also massive disparities that are emerging within educated millennial Sikhs. Yeah. So what I was arguing was that actually, you know, in the UK, most Sikh youth go into higher education. Okay, anything up to 90% of 18-year-olds are entering higher education. So, but you know, access to education and then access to employment afterwards is not necessarily guaranteeing success for them. Yes, there is a large number who are high flyers, you know, who have benefited from this education. You know, we have a massive growth in the Sikh professional middle class in the UK, but there is also a very large number who are actually, you know, have not really benefited. You know, education has not improved their upward social mobility. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to argue that there's this massive polarization within the Sikh youth community, within educated millennial Sikhs. And in a way, you know, that's a very relevant feature. You know, so you got racial disparities, but you also got these massive disparities within ethnic groups too.
And racial discrimination has something to do with that.
And racial discrimination plays an important part of that. Yes, yes, of course. You know, the fact that a lot of these Sikh graduates are not able to get the graduate level jobs. You know, they're having to sort of do all sorts of, you know, undergraduate level, sort of really non-graduate kind of jobs,
Right.
does mean that there are racial factors at work. You know, you hear that from Sikhs youth themselves, that there are so many barriers that they have to cross. Yeah.
So you start off as an economist, but increasingly, since I'm a sociologist, so you look more like a sociologist to me, but but you also embrace the larger cultural issues, and it's just you demonstrate a wonderful blending of scholarship and interest. So Shinder, you've been involved in the field for a long time, not as long as anybody I know, including me. So have you seen the field change, and how do you see it developing, the field of Sikh studies?
Well, the important point is that the field of Sikh studies has expanded, and that's the fantastic news. You know, it keeps expanding year by year.
We see this in this webinar, so many different interests, from music, art, and culture.
That's right. So that's fantastic news. That and I think it will keep expanding. But I think there are sort of, we need to be a little bit careful here about what is expanding, what kind of Sikh studies are emerging. So I've been thinking about this because, you know, I'm going to present a paper at UC Riverside conference on the state, which is actually on the state of Sikh studies. I've been thinking about it. That's right. He talked about it in his conversation. Now, you know, I want to really think about classifying, categorizing Sikh studies, current Sikh studies. So my initial thinking, and this needs a lot of thinking through. My initial thinking is that actually what we have are actually three types of Sikh studies. So one is what I would call ad hoc or peripheral Sikh studies, okay, which is where people from all discipline areas, people from all backgrounds come in and they look at the Sikhs as a case study. You know, whether it's to do with the religious symbols, whether it's to do with ethnic nationalism, you know, they would come, they'd do a paper, and that's the end, you know, because they're engaged in other research questions, other research projects. So Sikhs are basically a case study. So that's one kind, and these people sort of are on the periphery, okay? But we count them as part of Sikh studies. Then there is this larger group, which I would call applied Sikh studies, for want of a better word. So here, these are social scientists, people in humanities, who are again using Sikh studies, but they really are extending their own discipline area. Okay, so if you're in economics, if you're in politics, anthropology, sociology, you want to look at what is the latest fad, if you like, what is the latest developments in your field, and you want to basically expand that field, expand the boundaries of that discipline area. And so you have people who are using Sikhs as an application. So you have a massive growth in what I would call empirical knowledge of the Sikh experience, okay, in different contexts, from different discipline areas, and that's the growth area. And increasingly, this is going towards more like sort of diaspora studies, ethnic studies. You know, that seems to be but of course, you know, scholars get merit awards for contribution to their discipline area. You know, I know you would disagree with that, but unfortunately, that's how research assessment exercises work.
Oh, I know.
You know, so you want your work to be counted in political science, in anthropology, in economics, and you want to make sure you're contributing to that discipline area.
Sure.
You know the situation very well. Now, so that's the second one, and then the third one is what I call classical Sikh studies. Okay, This is where Sikhs you studying the Sikh tradition. You have a dedicated focus on studying the Sikh tradition, its founding, its evolution, its dispersion around the globe. But the focus here is on historical texts, not just the Guru Granth Sahib, but lots of different texts, different kinds of literature that is available, which has not been looked at before. So this is also empirical knowledge, increase in empirical knowledge, but here you're contributing to the wider narrative of the development of the Sikh tradition. Okay, so unfortunately, there are very few scholars that are now remaining in this area, because there is a generational change going on. There are few and fewer sort of new scholars who are going to get access to the sort of 18th century, 19th century, even earlier literature, because their language skills, their all sorts of other hurdles that access to these materials. So unfortunately, that's the area which actually, in my opinion, should be expanding, but it's not. So I see this kind of tension that is now emerging in Sikh studies.
No, I think you put it very well. And that third area is what we used to think Sikh studies was. I mean, that was the study of the text and early history and development of the tradition and of the community. And as you're saying now, that with this enormous expansion of research in other areas of Sikhism, then that kind of core history of text and tradition is not as strong as it used to be.
Well, yes, I agree, and yes, that's what I'm saying. But I think I need to also say why that's necessary. Why that kind of that is what needs expanding. It's because there are two things. One is there are around 25 to 30 million Sikhs around the world. Okay, but the global population is 8 billion. Okay. And the Sikh population is not increasing at all relative to the global population. So we are becoming a minority, more and more a minority in different countries. And in a few decades, I think Sikhs will be a minority in Punjab too, because at the moment, we are just marginally in the majority, but that's going to go. So there are issues of invisibility, there are issues of marginality, identity, Sikh identity, which I think are important. So we need to do more work in order to strengthen our knowledge of the Sikh tradition. Now, apart from that, I think an important point is that there are so many unanswered questions, because Sikh tradition is only 550 years old. Okay, there are so many unanswered questions that we don't know about the tradition. We still have problem with finding proper dates. There's controversy over the Nanak Shahi calendar. We don't agree on the dates that are. There's controversy over, let's say, the authorship of the Dasam Granth. There's a lot of work to do. There are lots of other questions about special events, personalities, during the Guru period, also in the post-Guru period, that we still don't understand. And that's important because we, as a minority community, we need to have that strong sense that we belong to an original tradition. As you know, in India, Hindutva agenda is rampant. Minorities are actually, at risk in various ways. The Sikh Panth, the Sikh community, has always sort of said, Sikh Panth is in danger. So yes, it's actually that danger is more apparent now than ever. So if we are just talking about Sikhs in the diaspora, lived experiences, that's great. But at the same time, we need to actually have a very firm understanding of exactly what our tradition is, how it's original, and how we need to maintain that originality, that tradition going forward.
So Shinder, your message to those young scholars out there is, don't think that, you know, people like Graywall and Harband Singh and Bashar Singh and Gurinder Singh Maan have done everything. You know, there's still more to be discovered and more to be explored, and it's important for our contemporary understanding of the community as well as for the historical understanding.
Absolutely, and you know, we that danger of you know, Sikhism itself, the Sikh tradition is a pluralist tradition, and you know, we don't there is a danger of that. It just sort of withers, you know, that there's a you know, some kind of a withering away, absorption or whatever. That's a real danger which could happen. Only last week the SGPC passed a resolution condemning the activities of the RSS, saying, look, you know,
I noticed that.
Yeah. So it's a real issue, and scholars have a responsibility to actually ensure, you know, we have a better understanding of the Sikh tradition, its originality, and the boundaries that are you know, that should exist if the community is to have a future in a way.
Shinder, I've hogged this conversation to myself probably too long, but there are a bunch of questions that have come up, and I want to turn to them. Professor Hawley from Canada was noticing your comments about the Kisan Andolan or the Kisan Morcha, and he says he wants to put you on the spot a bit. And he wants you to tell if this Morcha has affected India-Sikh relations in the diaspora. Is there in the diaspora community any kind of contention over whether to support the Andolan or not?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Michael.
I know the Sikh Foundation is 100% behind the Kisan Andolan.
Absolutely,
I am, but I don't know. Is there a conflict with?
I think that there is almost unanimous support for the rightly so, for the farmer, the Andolan, you know, absolutely. But we need to also, you know, understand the sort of kind of politics of the politics that are going on. We also know that, you know, the Indian government is not happy with this massive support. You know, they're not happy with the kind of financial support, not just emotional support, that is going on to support the farmers. So all sorts of barriers are being created. And we also know that our Hindu groups, or I would say supporters of Prime Minister Modi, some Hindutva groups who are also countering this. You know, not just in Canada, but also in different parts. In Australia, for example, there have been issues there, who are countering this. So there is this tension that has developed among the communities, you know, South Asian communities, especially within the Sikhs and Hindus in the diaspora. That tension developed during the Khalistan movement. Okay, so it's nothing new, but you know, we need to sort of be careful in how we are sort of treating, looking at this kind of sport. So these issues will be brought out in the journal paper.
Gurdas Dhadwal is asking a question about a movement that I have to confess I didn't know anything about. He said there's a growing phenomenon in the Punjab of the Yesu satsangs, whereby Sikhs and Christians are practicing Christianity, or kind of trying to merge it with Christianity and Sikhism and Hinduism. I must confess I didn't know about this movement. Do you? And
no, I don't know much about it, but I know that there's been a lot of sort of if you like, increase in convergence, I'm not sure what the word is, increase in the number of Sikhs who are now becoming part of the joining Christian movement. So there is that's going on. There's no doubt, but there are also
some are doing it for political purposes, like Nikki Haley, is now suddenly has become a Christian.
Yeah. So that is there. In fact, it's interesting. It's interesting that when the SGPC passed this resolution against the RSS, the RSS replied back, saying, "Look, we are not the one that are converting Sikhs to Hindus. Look at a number of Christians that are now, the people moving from Sikhism to Christianity. We're not doing that. We're actually more interested in what they call karvapsi. We want to bring them back. So yes, these politics will go on. I think the activities of the RSS have increased in Punjab in the last, I would say, about 5-10 years. And they're only likely, now that the politics in Punjab have gone really sort of massive shifts with the breakup of the alliance between the Akali Dal and the BJP, I think this area is going to get murkier. So there is going to be a lot of activity by the BJP RSS in Punjab, and that is actually going to affect the Sikh community, maybe create disunity within the Sikh community.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting discussion. Our colleague Pashar Singh from Riverside asked about the Global Center for Sikh and Punjab Studies, and one about its financial support. Is it primarily community supported, or does it have some institutional support?
This is the Global Institute of Sikh Studies?
Yeah. The Global Institute for Sikh Studies.
Yeah, it's at the moment it's not. It's a non-profit organization. It's not engaged, as far as I know. It's not engaged in any funding for running the center, but it does actually sort of raise money. For example, for, let's say they want to sponsor a course in on Sikhism at a particular university, and that's one of the activities. So I know about several courses at Rutgers, Claremont College, Hiram College, I think, where individuals may give a small amount of money in order to have a course on Sikhism delivered. But generally, I don't think there is any mass financing going on, but it has the support of a large number of members of the Sikh community on the East Coast.
Our colleague Opinderjit Kaur Tucker from Wolverhampton has a question about the UK-USA contrast in Sikh studies. And when I talked with Opinderjit and when I talked with Gurharpal about this, that was one of the questions I raised. Is there a difference in the way in which Sikh studies has developed in the UK from the United States? And is there anything that we can learn from that experience?
There are obvious differences. In the UK, we've never had, we don't have a tradition so much, but particularly within the Sikh community, of wealthy Sikhs, philanthropists. We don't have that tradition, not yet, maybe in the future. So whatever has been achieved in Sikh studies in the UK has been through community involvement. The only sort of sport I can sort of think of now is sport for the lectureship, endowed lectureship at University of Birmingham, which is endowed by the sort of Nishkan Sevak Jatha, so the local Bhai Mahinder Singh organization. So that's the only bit of philanthropic kind of endowment that I see, but others are either done by the universities or not at all. Individuals working on their own in their own institutions, trying to promote Sikh studies. And of course, in the USA, we have endowed chairs, and we have also individuals who are working in their own institutions too.
Right.
Yeah, so there is a massive contrast, but I'm not sure, and I think This may sound controversial, but I'm not really still sure. I think it's still to be decided whether the USA model of Sikh studies is necessarily the right one to, because I have this question in my mind, and this is for Peshawara's conference. I have this question in mind. What is the added value of endowed chairs in Sikh studies? I want to know, obviously, added value for whom? What is added value? That these are issues to be talked about. So I still have that question in my mind. So what is the right model? Is the USA model is the one to be followed? Canada hasn't got the USA model, as far as I know. Canada has a community endowed chair, a UBC, but USA has 6-7 endowed chairs.
And your point, I think, in part is, why should universities have to rely on communities to support these positions? They should come from within the universities themselves. Absolutely. And that's what's happening in the UK. And your point is that this may be a more institutionally integrative way to think about Sikh studies in the future. And it's an interesting point.
Yeah. It sort of brings up this question of marginality. Why should Sikh studies be a marginal subject? Why, as you say, why aren't institutions embracing, as part of their diversity curriculum, whatever, why aren't they embracing the study of Sikhs as part of their courses, the courses that are on offer? So, maybe the community needs to more to pressure these institutions, but the institutions need to be responsive to the environment around them. And this takes me back actually to my sort of years at SOAS when I was a graduate student there. SOAS was a very kind of unique school in the sense that it did a lot of work on India, on Punjab. Professor Garewal, I think, at one time was associated with SOAS. So, but it had absolutely the college had absolutely no link with the Sikh Punjabi community. So there's that disconnect, and that disconnect in a way still continues. Institutions should look at their local community and should try to serve the needs of that local community too.
Here's a question on how wide you define Sikhism. Do you include Nanak Panthis in the Punjab, in Pakistan? What about Sindhis? What about the Ravidasis? I mean, Upinderjit Thakur studies Ravidasis. I think probably includes them within the wider Sikh orbit. What about these different groups that have a relationship to the Sikh tradition, but are they part of the Sikh tradition?
well, yeah. I mean, the different ways of answering that question, but I think it goes back to the points I was raising earlier about what is the dominant narrative of the Sikh tradition? Do we understand the dominant narrative? Are we do we have that dominant narrative? Yes, of course, we can talk about these groups on the margins all the time, and that's a good thing to do. We should be, if they want to be associated with the Sikh Panth, that's absolutely fine. They should be treated, and of course, people self-identify. If they identify with Guru Nanak, absolutely right. They should not be categorized as the other. Okay, they should not be sort of seen as sort of kind of threat to the Khalsa Sikhs or whatever. But we need to get our story correct first. We need to have a dominant narrative of the Sikh tradition, which I think, it's a new tradition, but still there's a lot of work to be done. If you look at, you would know that in Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, there are these still sort of questions being raised about the founding, about the different episodes in the development of these traditions. And these are traditions over 2,000 years old. We are 550 years old. So I don't think, that's just my personal opinion, I don't think we actually have the main Sikh narrative fully understood yet. And we need to keep that in mind. And that's what classical Sikh studies should do. And I would like to promote that kind of work.
Rano Singh has several questions that return to the Kisan Andolan. And he's asking a question I think you partially answered, whether global corporate interests have influenced Modi in his decisions. And I think you've already indicated that it has. But maybe you want to follow up on that a little bit further, and whether at one time it seemed like Trump was a big Modi supporter, and now Biden is taking a somewhat different stance, and Biden is trying to rejuvenate rural communities and rural agriculture. Would that have, you think, any influence on India's policies?
I think the major influence on India's policy is not so much coming from Biden or from Trump, previously from Trump. I think a lot of it is coming from actually multilateral organizations. So, for example, WTO, IMF, all of these institutions they pursue this ideology of neoliberalism. Okay, so there is this view that farm subsidies need to be cut. You need to introduce the free market into the food grain market. So that's actually, and in order to meet these commitments, the governments are sort of are trying hard to cut back on subsidies. But we know everywhere around the world, the US is a classic example of how and why farm subsidies are absolutely important. Most of the farming community in the USA would be devastated without farm support policies. So why are they pushing that agenda on poor countries, but not pushing the same way on the rich countries? So it's that kind of ideological kind of that kind of pressure, which is I think equally responsible for what Modi is doing.
So there's a question about whether these conversations about the State of the Union of this field of Sikh studies is going to be available to future scholars. That's really a question for the Sikh Foundation. They'll preserve these recordings, whether they want to try to do more with that and having a transcribed kind of discussion about the future of Sikh studies taken from these, we'll find out. But the final question is, leave it to my friend Sonia Dami, who's a wonderful art historian, and has this keen eye for Sikh art, to look at you, Shinder, and then look past you to see a painting on the wall over on the other side. Look to your left.
Okay.
And she wants to know. Tell us the story of that painting.
Well, okay. So this is a portrait of one of the missile leaders, and it's a portrait of. I had to check this a couple of years ago. This is a portrait actually of Ramgarhia. It says in Ramgarhia. So I thought it was Ahluwalia, but I went back. This is a portrait done by R.M. Singh. He's an eminent artist, in Punjab, lives in Chandigarh, and I had the pleasure of meeting him during this the Punjab summer school. So I got this off him because he was doing all these different portraits of different missile leaders, and he's a wonderful artist. So I got this I don't know, about 10 years ago maybe, from him. So that's who he is.
So
I sort of developed an interest in art, as part of the Punjab Studies program. That's also the added value of that program.
Well, be careful. You'll turn up like Narinder Singh Kapani and just have houses full of Sikh art.
No, I don't think I could even achieve that.
No, I mean, his collections are wonderful. They're seen all over the world in the finest art museums. But I guess to see your collection, we're going to have to come to your house.
Oh, I don't have a collection. I have just some items.
Well, good for you. Shinder, this has been such a pleasure. I always enjoy talking with you, but it's even more fun to do so in this format where other people can share in and ask questions. And you've had such a rich, lifelong experience with Sikh studies, and you've contributed so much to the field and continue to do so. So I want to thank you for all of that, and thank you especially for the conversation today and all that we've learned from you. So Shinder, we'll be in touch, but thank you for this interesting conversation today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation. Thank you.
Great.
Enjoyed
And
it.
we'll see everybody else in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.